Commander Sarah Mitchell had always been different. Growing up in a small farming town in Nebraska, she never imagined she would one day stand in the most secure military facility in the world, surrounded by the nation's top military leaders. But here she was, 28 years old, with scars that told stories most people would never believe, and secrets that could change the course of history. The Pentagon's war room buzzed with controlled energy. Maps covered every wall, screens displayed real-time intelligence from around the globe, and the air hummed with the quiet intensity that comes when the world's most powerful military minds gather in one place. Sarah stood near the back, her presence barely noticed by the dozens of high-ranking officials filling the room. She preferred it that way. In her line of work, being invisible was often the difference between life and death. Admiral James Harrison commanded attention the moment he walked into the room. At 55, he was a legend among the Navy SEALs, a man whose reputation preceded him into every room he entered. His silver hair was perfectly groomed, his uniform spotless, and his presence filled the space like electricity. Behind him walked a group of younger SEALs, all muscle and confidence, their eyes scanning the room with the practiced awareness of warriors. Sarah had heard the stories about Admiral Harrison. How he had led impossible missions in the darkest corners of the world. How he had saved countless lives and eliminated threats that most people would never know existed. How he demanded excellence from everyone around him and never accepted anything less than perfection. The briefing began with the usual formalities. Intelligence reports, threat assessments, strategic planning. Sarah listened with half her attention, her mind still processing the events of the past 72 hours. The mission in Syria had been brutal, even by her standards. 3 days behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence that couldn't be obtained any other way. 3 days of moving like a ghost through hostile territory, avoiding detection, completing objectives that others deemed impossible. She had returned that morning, her body exhausted but her mind sharp. There had been no time to rest, no time to process what she had seen and done. The intelligence she had gathered was too important, too time-sensitive. Within hours of her return, she had been summoned to this briefing, to this room filled with people who made decisions that shaped the world. Admiral Harrison's voice cut through her thoughts like a blade. He was discussing the latest developments in the Middle East, his tone crisp and authoritative. Sarah found herself studying his face, noting the intelligence in his eyes, the way he commanded respect without raising his voice. She had worked with many military leaders over the years, but few had the presence that Harrison possessed. The briefing continued for another hour. Maps were updated, strategies discussed, resources allocated. Sarah contributed when asked, her reports concise and accurate. She had learned long ago that in rooms like this, words carried weight. Every statement was analyzed, every recommendation considered. There was no room for uncertainty, no tolerance for error. As the formal briefing concluded, the room began to empty. Groups of officers clustered together, discussing details and making plans. Sarah gathered her materials, preparing to leave, when she noticed Admiral Harrison approaching. His entourage of SEALs followed, their eyes curious as they studied her. "Commander Mitchell," Harrison said, his voice carrying the authority of decades of leadership. "I've been reading your reports. Impressive work in Syria." "Thank you, sir," Sarah replied, meeting his gaze directly. She had learned never to show weakness, never to appear intimidated, regardless of who she was speaking with. Harrison studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Behind him, his SEALs watched the exchange with interest. Sarah could feel their assessment, their curiosity about who she was and what she had done to earn their admiral's attention. "I have to admit," Harrison continued, "your file makes for interesting reading. Multiple successful missions, 0 failures, and somehow you've managed to stay completely off the radar. That's not easy in today's military." Sarah remained silent. Her record spoke for itself, and she had no need to elaborate. The mission she had completed, the objectives she had achieved, the lives she had saved, these were facts that existed in classified files, known only to a select few. "Your commanding officers speak very highly of your capabilities," Harrison said. "They describe you as someone who can accomplish things that others cannot." Someone who operates in the shadows, invisible until the moment action is required. One of the SEALs behind Harrison shifted slightly, his interest clearly piqued. Sarah recognized the type, young, confident, probably used to being the most elite operator in any room. She had worked with dozens like him over the years, men who prided themselves on their skills and their brotherhood. "I do my job, sir," Sarah said simply. "Nothing more, nothing less." Harrison smiled at her response, but there was something calculating in his expression. "In the SEAL teams, we have a tradition. Everyone has a call sign, a name that captures something essential about who they are as an operator. It builds unity, creates identity." Sarah nodded but said nothing. She understood military traditions, the importance of brotherhood and shared identity. In her world, however, such things were often luxuries she couldn't afford. "So tell me, Commander," Harrison said, his tone becoming lighter, almost casual. Behind him, his SEALs leaned forward slightly, curious about her response. "If you were to have a call sign, what would it be? What name would capture who you are as an operator?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Sarah could feel the attention of everyone nearby, could sense the curiosity and expectation. It was meant to be a simple question, a moment of military camaraderie, a way for a senior officer to connect with a subordinate. But, for Sarah, the question carried weight that Admiral Harrison couldn't possibly understand. She looked at him for a long moment, considering her response. In her mind, she could see the faces of targets who had never seen her coming. She could remember the feeling of moving through enemy territory like a whisper of wind, present but undetectable. She could recall the countless times she had completed missions that others thought impossible, all because she had mastered the art of being invisible. "Shadow," she said quietly. The single word fell into the conversation like a stone dropped into still water. The casual atmosphere that had surrounded the exchange suddenly shifted, becoming something heavier, more serious. Admiral Harrison's expression changed, the lightness disappearing from his eyes as he studied her with new intensity. Behind him, his SEALs had gone completely still. The easy confidence that had surrounded them moments before was replaced by something else, recognition, perhaps, or a dawning understanding that they were in the presence of something they didn't fully comprehend. Harrison's eyes narrowed slightly. "Shadow," he repeated, testing the word, feeling its weight. Sarah nodded once, her expression unchanged. She had answered his question honestly, and now she could see the gears turning in his mind as he processed the implications of her response. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions and growing tension. Other conversations in the room continued, but Sarah could feel that something had fundamentally changed in the space around them. What had begun as a simple, casual interaction had become something else entirely. Admiral Harrison had asked for her call sign as a joke, a moment of military humor meant to break the ice and establish rapport. But Sarah's response had done something he hadn't expected. It had revealed a truth about her that was both impressive and unsettling. She wasn't just another special operations soldier. She wasn't just someone who completed difficult missions. She was something else entirely, someone who had earned a reputation that preceded her, someone whose very name carried implications that most people couldn't fully understand. The young SEAL behind Harrison shifted uncomfortably, his earlier confidence replaced by uncertainty. He had probably expected a typical military call sign, something aggressive or humorous, something that fit the usual patterns of military brotherhood. Instead, he had heard something that spoke to capabilities and experiences beyond his comprehension. Harrison continued to study Sarah, his mind clearly working through the implications of what he had just learned. In his decades of military service, he had encountered many exceptional operators, but there was something different about the woman standing before him. "Shadow," he said again, this time with a different inflection, as if he was beginning to understand the full meaning of the word. Sarah waited, her expression calm and professional. She had no regrets about her answer, no desire to explain or elaborate. The truth was what it was, regardless of how others chose to interpret it. Around them, the war room continued its business, but the conversation between them had created a bubble of tension that seemed to separate them from everything else. Other officers moved past, discussing strategies and logistics, but their words seemed distant and unimportant compared to the silent communication happening between Harrison and Sarah. Finally, Harrison spoke again. "That's quite a call sign, Commander. It suggests capabilities that most people can only imagine." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied simply. The acknowledgement hung between them, neither confirmation nor denial, but something more powerful than either. It was an acceptance of truth, a recognition of reality that couldn't be argued with or explained away. One of Harrison's SEALs cleared his throat quietly, breaking the tension that had been building. The Admiral glanced back at his team, noting their discomfort, their uncertainty about what they had just witnessed. "Gentlemen," Harrison said, his voice returning to its normal authoritative tone, "I think we've learned something important today. The military is filled with exceptional people, operators whose capabilities exceed what most of us can imagine." He turned back to Sarah, his expression respectful but wary. "Thank you for your honesty, Commander Mitchell. And for your service." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, gathering her materials and preparing to leave. As she walked toward the exit, she could feel their eyes following her, could sense the questions and speculation that her simple answer had generated. Admiral Harrison had asked for her call sign as a joke, expecting a moment of light military humor. Instead, he had received a glimpse into a world that operated beyond the normal boundaries of military service, a world where individuals like Sarah Mitchell earned reputations that spoke to capabilities most people couldn't comprehend. The war room gradually returned to its normal rhythm, but something had changed. Admiral Harrison stood quietly for several minutes, his mind processing what he had just experienced. His SEALs gathered around him, their earlier confidence replaced by a new respect for the complexities of modern military operations. Sarah Mitchell had left the room, but her presence lingered. Her single-word answer had revealed truths that couldn't be unlearned, had opened doors to questions that demanded answers. Shadow. The word carried implications that would haunt Admiral Harrison long after their brief encounter had ended, forcing him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about the modern military and the extraordinary individuals who operated in its darkest corners. Admiral Harrison couldn't shake the encounter from his mind. 3 days had passed since Commander Mitchell had spoken that single word, and it continued to echo in his thoughts like a persistent drumbeat. He sat in his office, staring at the classified files spread across his desk, but his concentration kept drifting back to that moment in the war room. Shadow. The word had been delivered with such quiet certainty, such complete acceptance of its meaning, that it had transformed a casual conversation into something profound. Harrison had commanded thousands of sailors and SEALs throughout his career, had worked with the most elite operators in the military, but he had never encountered anyone quite like Sarah Mitchell. His aide, Lieutenant Commander David Park, knocked on the door and entered with a fresh stack of intelligence reports. Park had been Harrison's right-hand man for 2 years, a brilliant analyst with an encyclopedic knowledge of special operations personnel. "Sir, I have the updated briefing materials for tomorrow's strategic planning session," Park said, setting the files on the Admiral's desk. Harrison looked up from his paperwork, studying his aide's face. Park was one of the few people who had access to the most classified information in the Navy, someone whose discretion and analytical abilities had earned Harrison's complete trust. "David," Harrison said slowly, "what do you know about Commander Sarah Mitchell?" Park's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the slightest tightening around his eyes that Harrison didn't miss. In the world of military intelligence, such subtle changes often revealed more than words ever could. "Commander Mitchell?" Park said carefully. "She's attached to JSOC Special Operations. Her record is impressive." Harrison leaned back in his chair, noting the careful way his aide had chosen his words. In their line of work, when someone described a record as impressive with that particular tone, it usually meant there was much more to the story. "I had a brief conversation with her after the briefing 3 days ago," Harrison said. "Asked her about call signs, meant it as a casual question. Her response was unexpected." Park remained silent, but Harrison could see the intelligence working behind his eyes. After 2 years of working together, they had developed an understanding that went beyond words. "She said shadow," Harrison continued. "Just like that. One word, delivered with complete certainty. And, I have to tell you, David, it changed the entire atmosphere in the room. This time, Park's reaction was more noticeable. His posture straightened slightly, and he glanced toward the closed door of Harrison's office. "Sir," Park said quietly, "perhaps this conversation should be moved to a more secure location." Harrison felt a chill run down his spine. In his decades of military service, he had learned to recognize the signs when a seemingly simple situation contained hidden depths. Park's suggestion that they needed additional security meant that Sarah Mitchell's story was far more complex than her personnel file indicated. 20 minutes later, they sat in an SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility, deep within the Pentagon. The room was sterile and windowless, designed to prevent any form of electronic surveillance. Harrison had used rooms like this thousands of times, but he rarely felt the weight of secrecy as heavily as he did now. "What I'm about to tell you," Park began, his voice barely above a whisper, "exists in files that fewer than 20 people in the entire military have access to. Commander Mitchell's real record is classified at levels that most general officers will never see." Harrison leaned forward, his full attention focused on his aide's words. "Her official personnel file shows a standard special operations career," Park continued. "Multiple deployments, successful mission completion, exemplary service record. But that's just the cover story." Harrison waited, understanding that Park was choosing his words carefully, deciding how much classified information to reveal even in this secure environment. "The truth is that Commander Mitchell operates in a world that doesn't officially exist," Park said. "Her real missions, her actual achievements, her genuine capabilities, none of it appears in any normal military documentation." "What kind of missions?" Harrison asked. Park was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing his response. "The kind where success is measured by what doesn't happen, sir. Terrorist attacks that never occur. Weapons that never reach their intended targets. Enemy operations that fail for reasons that can never be explained." Harrison felt the pieces beginning to fall into place. "She's an assassin." "The term we use is direct action specialist," Park corrected quietly. "But, yes, essentially. Commander Mitchell is one of the most effective operators in the history of special operations. Her success rate is unprecedented, and her ability to operate undetected is beyond anything we've seen before." The weight of this revelation settled over Harrison like a heavy blanket. He had spent his career working with elite operators, but he was beginning to understand that Sarah Mitchell existed in a category entirely her own. "How many missions?" Harrison asked. 47 confirmed direct action operations over the past 6 years, Park replied. 47 successful eliminations of high-value targets. 0 failures, 0 compromises, 0 traces left behind. Harrison absorbed this information, his mind struggling to process the implications. In the SEAL teams, a success rate like that was unheard of. The most elite operators in the world might achieve success on 8 or 9 out of 10 missions. Complete perfection across 47 operations was beyond extraordinary, it was almost supernatural. "Hence the call sign," Harrison murmured. "Shadow is more than just a call sign, sir," Park said. "It's become a legend within certain circles of the intelligence community. Enemy organizations have begun referring to unexplained mission failures as shadow kills. They know something is happening, someone is operating against them, but they can never find proof." Harrison shook his head slowly, trying to reconcile this information with the quiet, professional woman he had met 3 days ago. She had seemed competent and confident, but nothing about her demeanor had suggested the level of capabilities Park was describing. "How does she do it?" Harrison asked. "That's the question everyone wants answered," Park replied. "Her methods are studied by intelligence agencies around the world, but no one has been able to replicate her results. She seems to have an intuitive understanding of human psychology, an ability to predict behavior patterns, and a talent for becoming invisible that defies explanation." Park reached into his briefcase and withdrew a tablet computer. After entering several security codes, he pulled up a file that contained only a few lines of text. "This is from her psychological evaluation," Park said, turning the screen toward Harrison. The assessment was conducted by the military's most experienced behavioral analysts. Harrison read the brief report, his eyebrows raising as he processed the clinical language. The evaluation described Sarah Mitchell as possessing exceptional spatial intelligence, superior pattern recognition abilities, and psychological flexibility beyond normal parameters. But it was the final line that caught his attention. Subject demonstrates operational capabilities that exceed current understanding of human limitations. What does that mean? Harrison asked. The psychologists aren't entirely sure, Park admitted. They believe she has some combination of natural talent, intensive training, and psychological conditioning that allows her to operate in ways that other people simply cannot. Harrison set the tablet down, his mind reeling from these revelations. In his decades of military service, he had prided himself on understanding the capabilities and limitations of the people under his command. But Sarah Mitchell represented something beyond his experience, something that challenged everything he thought he knew about human potential. Why wasn't I briefed on this before? Harrison asked. Because her existence is compartmentalized at the highest levels, Park explained. Only a handful of people in the entire government know the truth about what she does. Even most general officers and senior officials are kept in the dark. Harrison understood the logic behind such secrecy, but it still unsettled him. In the military, information was power, and the fact that someone with Sarah Mitchell's capabilities had been operating without his knowledge suggested that there were entire layers of military operations he wasn't aware of. Who controls her missions? Harrison asked. The Joint Special Operations Command, but only at the highest levels. Her operations are planned and authorized by people whose names don't appear on any organizational chart. The implications of this struck Harrison like a physical blow. The woman he had casually questioned about call signs was essentially a strategic weapon, someone whose actions could influence the balance of power in conflicts around the world. The mission in Syria, Harrison said, remembering the briefing 3 days ago. What was she really doing there? Park hesitated before answering. I can tell you that a major terrorist operation was supposed to take place last week. Hundreds of civilians were going to die in coordinated attacks across 3 European cities. The operation failed because several key organizers mysteriously died in accidents and equipment malfunctions. Harrison stared at his aide, understanding the implication without needing further explanation. Sarah Mitchell had single-handedly prevented a massive terrorist attack, eliminating multiple targets across a wide geographic area, all while maintaining complete operational security. She did all of that in 72 hours? Harrison asked. According to the timeline, yes sir. She infiltrated Syria, identified and eliminated 5 high-value targets, gathered critical intelligence, and exfiltrated without leaving any evidence of American involvement. Harrison felt a mixture of awe and unease. The capabilities Park was describing went beyond elite military training into something that seemed almost supernatural. No wonder Sarah Mitchell called herself Shadow. It wasn't just a call sign, it was an accurate description of her operational reality. How many people like her are there? Harrison asked. As far as we know, Commander Mitchell is unique, Park replied. The military has tried to replicate her training and methods, but no one else has demonstrated her level of capability. Harrison sat back in his chair, trying to process everything he had learned. In the space of 30 minutes, his understanding of modern special operations had been fundamentally altered. Sarah Mitchell wasn't just an exceptional soldier, she was a singular individual whose capabilities redefined what was possible in the realm of covert operations. Sir, Park said quietly, there's one more thing you should know. Harrison looked up, wondering what other revelations were coming. Commander Mitchell specifically requested to attend that briefing 3 days ago. She doesn't normally participate in general strategic planning sessions. She asked to be included because she wanted to meet you. Why? Harrison asked. We're not entirely sure, sir. But, given her capabilities and her level of operational independence, when someone like Commander Mitchell expresses interest in meeting a specific senior officer, it usually means something significant is about to happen. Harrison felt a chill run through him. The casual conversation about call signs suddenly took on new meaning. Sarah Mitchell hadn't simply answered his question, she had been evaluating him, assessing him for reasons that remained unclear. "What do you think she wants?" Harrison asked. Park shook his head slowly. "I honestly don't know, sir. But, in my experience, when someone with her capabilities makes contact with senior leadership, it's because she's identified a situation that requires resources or authorization beyond her normal operational parameters." Harrison stood and began pacing the small confines of the SCIF, his mind racing through the implications of everything he had learned. Sarah Mitchell represented capabilities that could reshape military strategy, but she also represented unknowns that made him deeply uncomfortable. "Set up a meeting," Harrison said finally. "I need to understand what she wants and why she's suddenly interested in making contact with SEAL Command." Park nodded, making notes on his tablet. "I'll arrange something through appropriate channels. Given her security level, it may take some time to coordinate." As they prepared to leave the SCIF, Harrison found himself thinking about that moment in the war room when Sarah Mitchell had said "Shadow." At the time, he had thought it was simply an unusual call sign. Now he understood that it was something much more significant. It was the signature of someone who operated beyond the normal boundaries of military service, someone whose capabilities challenged everything he thought he knew about human potential. Admiral Harrison had asked for her call sign as a joke, but Shadow had brought something to that room that was far from humorous. She had brought the weight of secrets that could change the world, and now those secrets were his responsibility to understand and protect. The secure facility was located 40 miles outside Washington, hidden within what appeared to be an abandoned industrial complex. Admiral Harrison had driven there himself, following the carefully provided directions that had led him through a series of checkpoints and security screenings. Even with his highest-level clearances, the process had taken nearly 2 hours. Now he sat in a windowless conference room, waiting for Sarah Mitchell to arrive. The room was sparse and functional, containing only a steel table and 2 chairs. No decorations, no windows, no obvious surveillance equipment, though Harrison was certain their conversation would be monitored and recorded by systems he couldn't see. Lieutenant Commander Park had briefed him extensively over the past week, providing additional classified information about Sarah Mitchell's operational history. The more Harrison learned, the more he understood that he was about to meet someone whose capabilities existed at the very edge of human possibility. The door opened without sound, and Sarah Mitchell entered. She moved with the same quiet confidence he remembered from their first encounter, but now Harrison saw it differently. What he had previously interpreted as professional composure, he now recognized as the controlled awareness of someone who had survived in environments where the slightest mistake meant death. She wore civilian clothes, dark jeans and a simple black sweater, but her posture and the way her eyes automatically swept the room revealed her military background. Harrison found himself studying her more carefully than before, looking for signs of the extraordinary individual Park had described. "Admiral Harrison," Sarah said, taking the seat across from him. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Commander Mitchell," Harrison replied, noting how she had dispensed with formal military protocol. In this environment, apparently, normal rules didn't apply. They sat in silence for a moment, each taking the measure of the other. Harrison had commanded thousands of sailors and officers, but he had never felt quite the same sense of being evaluated as he did now. Sarah Mitchell's gaze was direct and intelligent, but there was something else behind it, a depth of experience that seemed incongruous with her age. "You've been asking questions about me," Sarah said finally. It wasn't an accusation, simply a statement of fact delivered without emotion. Harrison realized that in her world, gathering intelligence about potential contacts was probably standard procedure. "Yes," Harrison admitted. "Our conversation last week raised some questions that I felt needed answers." Sarah nodded slightly, as if this was exactly what she had expected. "And what did you learn?" Harrison considered his response carefully. Even in this secure environment, he wasn't certain how much classified information he should reveal, or what Sarah Mitchell already knew about his investigation into her background. "I learned that your official record doesn't tell the whole story," Harrison said. "It's not supposed to," Sarah replied. "The whole story would compromise operations that are still ongoing." This casual acknowledgement of deception was unsettling, but Harrison was beginning to understand that Sarah Mitchell operated according to rules very different from those governing normal military service. I also learned that you specifically requested to attend the briefing where we met, Harrison continued. That seems unusual for someone in your position. Sarah's expression didn't change, but Harrison thought he detected the slightest hint of approval in her eyes, as if he had passed some kind of test. You have a reputation, Admiral Harrison, Sarah said. 30 years of distinguished service, multiple combat deployments, a record of making difficult decisions under extreme pressure. But, more importantly, you have a reputation for protecting the people under your command. Harrison waited, sensing that this was building towards something significant. In my line of work, Sarah continued, finding senior officers who can be trusted with certain types of information is extremely difficult. Most people at your level are focused on politics, career advancement, public relations. They make decisions based on how those decisions will affect their own futures. And, you believe I'm different? Harrison asked. I know you are, Sarah replied with certainty. I've read your complete service record, Admiral. Not the official version, the real one. I know about the operations you've commanded that will never be publicly acknowledged. I know about the decisions you've made that saved lives at the cost of your own advancement. Harrison felt a chill. If Sarah Mitchell had access to that level of classified information about his career, it meant she operated with authorizations that exceeded even his own high-level clearances. What do you want from me? Harrison asked directly. Sarah leaned forward slightly, her expression becoming more serious. I need your help with a situation that's developing, something that requires resources and capabilities beyond what I can access through normal channels. What kind of situation? Are you familiar with Operation Blackwater? Sarah asked. Harrison searched his memory, but the name meant nothing to him. No. It was a classified Navy SEAL operation that took place 8 years ago in Afghanistan. A high-value target elimination that went wrong. 6 SEALs were killed, and the mission was deemed a complete failure. Harrison nodded slowly. He had heard whispered references to failed operations over the years, missions that had ended badly and been buried under layers of classification and secrecy. What you probably don't know, Sarah continued, is that Operation Blackwater wasn't a failure. It was sabotaged from the inside. The words hit Harrison like a physical blow. In the military, few accusations were more serious than suggesting that American personnel had deliberately compromised a mission that resulted in the deaths of their comrades. That's a very serious allegation, Harrison said carefully. It's not an allegation, Sarah replied. It's a fact. Someone provided intelligence to enemy forces about the timing and location of that operation. The 6 SEALs who died were specifically targeted because they had discovered information that certain people wanted to remain hidden. Harrison felt his world shifting beneath him. If Sarah Mitchell was telling the truth, it meant that somewhere within the military command structure, there were individuals who had committed treason that resulted in the deaths of American soldiers. Do you have proof? Harrison asked. Sarah reached into her jacket and withdrew a small device that looked like a standard USB drive. She placed it on the table between them. Everything is on there, she said. Financial records, communications intercepts, operational plans. 8 years of investigation and evidence gathering. Harrison stared at the device, understanding that it contained information that could destroy careers and send people to prison for the rest of their lives. Why are you showing me this? Because the people responsible for Operation Blackwater are still in positions of power, Sarah said. They've continued their activities, compromising other operations, selling intelligence to foreign governments, profiting from the deaths of American soldiers. The magnitude of what she was describing was staggering. Harrison had spent his career believing in the integrity of the military system, trusting that the people at the highest levels of command shared his commitment to protecting American lives and interests. Who? Harrison asked. Names, ranks, and evidence are all on that drive, Sarah replied. But I can tell you that the conspiracy reaches into the highest levels of the Pentagon, including people you've worked with personally. Harrison felt sick. The idea that he had unknowingly collaborated with traitors, that he had trusted people who were responsible for the deaths of his fellow SEALs, was almost too much to process. "Why haven't you brought this to someone already?" Harrison asked. "Because I don't know who can be trusted," Sarah said simply. "The people involved have spent years building relationships, establishing credibility, positioning themselves to detect and eliminate threats to their operation." Harrison began to understand the impossible situation Sarah Mitchell found herself in. With evidence of treason at the highest levels of military command, normal channels of reporting and investigation were potentially compromised. "What do you need from me?" Harrison asked. "I need someone with your level of authority and credibility to help me bring this information to people who can act on it," Sarah said. "But, more than that, I need someone I can trust to handle this correctly." The weight of responsibility settled on Harrison's shoulders like a heavy cloak. Sarah Mitchell was asking him to become involved in an investigation that could shake the foundations of the military establishment, potentially destroying the careers and lives of people he had known and worked with for decades. "Why should I trust you?" Harrison asked. "How do I know this isn't some kind of elaborate deception or psychological operation?" Sarah's expression softened slightly, the first time Harrison had seen her display anything approaching human emotion. "You shouldn't trust me," she said quietly. "You should verify everything independently. Investigate the claims, follow the evidence, make your own determinations about what's true and what isn't." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "But, Admiral, while you're investigating, more operations are being compromised, more soldiers are dying, and the people responsible are getting richer and more powerful. Every day we delay is another day they have to cover their tracks and eliminate evidence." Harrison picked up the USB drive, feeling its weight in his palm. Such a small device to contain information that could change everything he thought he knew about his career and his colleagues. "If I agree to help you," Harrison said, "what exactly are you proposing we do?" "We gather additional evidence, build an airtight case, and then present it to the one person in the government who definitely isn't involved in this conspiracy," Sarah replied. "Who?" "The president," Sarah said. "This situation requires intervention at the highest levels, someone who can authorize a complete investigation without worrying about political consequences or career implications." Harrison absorbed this, understanding that Sarah Mitchell was proposing they take their evidence directly to the commander-in-chief, bypassing the entire military chain of command. "That's a bold plan," Harrison said. "It's the only plan that has a chance of working," Sarah replied. "Everyone else in the military hierarchy is either involved in the conspiracy or potentially compromised by it." Harrison stood and began pacing the small room, his mind racing through the implications of what Sarah Mitchell was proposing. If they were right, they would be heroes who had exposed a massive conspiracy and saved countless American lives. If they were wrong, their careers would be over and they would likely face court-martial proceedings. "I need time to think about this," Harrison said. "Of course," Sarah replied, standing as well. "But, while you're thinking, Admiral, consider this: 6 years ago, you lost 2 men in your command during a mission in Pakistan. The official report blamed equipment failure and enemy intelligence, but the real cause was information leaked by the same people who compromised Operation Blackwater." Harrison felt the blood drain from his face. The mission in Pakistan had haunted him for years, the loss of 2 excellent SEALs in what should have been a straightforward operation. He had never been satisfied with the official explanation, had always suspected that something more was involved. "You're saying that Chief Petty Officers Martinez and Thompson died because of this conspiracy?" Harrison asked. "I'm saying their deaths weren't the result of bad luck or tactical errors," Sarah replied. "They were murdered by people who are supposed to be on our side." The personal nature of this revelation changed everything for Harrison. He had attended the funerals of Martinez and Thompson, had spoken with their families, had carried the guilt of their deaths for 6 years. The possibility that they had been betrayed by their own command structure filled him with a rage he hadn't felt since his early combat deployments. "How long do I have to decide?" Harrison asked. "Not long," Sarah said. "Intelligence indicates that another major operation is being planned for next month. If we don't act soon, more soldiers are going to die. As Sarah Mitchell prepared to leave, Harrison found himself looking at her with new understanding. She wasn't just an exceptional soldier or even a legendary operative. She was someone who had taken on the responsibility of protecting American lives when the official systems had failed, someone who was willing to risk everything to expose the truth. "Commander," Harrison said as she reached the door. "When you chose the call sign Shadow, was it because of situations like this?" Sarah paused, her hand on the door handle. "I chose Shadow because sometimes the only